something that you just want to do design, not worry about hosting updates and all that kind of stuff.
Do you run iThemes on HostGator?
HostGator
hosting?
Well, it's funny because iThemes.com, the domain for the first year we were in business, we've been in business 3 years in January, was ran off a shared host, shared plan, like their baby plan at HostGator, and it was just getting pinned pretty hard. And then we finally realized we'd probably need a dedicated, and we switched it off. So, I mean, it's been a change for us. They do WordPress hosting at a high level, and my guys who know a lot more about dedicated boxes than I do tell me it's good, and I trust their opinion. So,
yeah, I'm gonna have to. I'm also a very satisfied HostGator customer. We have a server with them, and we host most of our client sites with that. We do the reseller thing, and we've just been totally pleased. I remember, as you mentioned, there was something happened like over Thanksgiving or something, and I put in a support ticket Thanksgiving Day, and an hour or two later it was answered, and I said, I thought this poor guy sitting on the other end of this computer is working right now, and but I've been pleased with that, and we actually use Google Apps for all of our clients' email systems. So, I mean, really the only thing we've got on the web server is their WordPress installation, and it works really well.
Gotcha. We've actually been using Amazon EC2 for a lot of our client sites. It's grid computing or cloud computing, and so you get a virtual box in the cloud where you can scale up or scale down if you need to. You can buy different instance sizes. It requires a Linux administrator. One of the guys at our company is a Linux administrator for a long time, and so he'll set up our EC2 instances, and he always jokes that we use the whole Amazon stack. We use the load balancers there, and database servers, and web servers, and S3 for storage and all of that. But we get really good performance out of those. Stephanie?
Well, like I said, most of my stuff is actually hosted on campus, and it's probably not relevant to what y'all are doing, but if you want to talk about it afterwards, we can chat about the intricacies of university IT. We actually did go off campus for a little while. We had some issues they were sort of starting up a new virtual hosting system that was going to cost a lot less than the old one. We were waiting and waiting and waiting for them to get it up. Wasn't getting up. My old server was dying. We had these old X servers that were just really underpowered. And I said, forget this. I'm going to go off campus until you guys get all this sorted out. And so we went with MDD Hosting, which is a really small company in New York. I was really happy with them. I was kind of almost a little bit sad that I had to come back on campus when they did get their stuff sorted out. MDD was great. I actually have had a live, chat with the guy. I think it was the owner of the company at like 3 a.m. on Thanksgiving. So really highly recommend them. But most of my stuff, I don't really deal too much with outside hosting, so I'm not much of an expert on that.
With your campus hosting, did you say you run it on IIS?
I have. Right now we've got CentOS install that I'm running it on.
Was that a pain to set up on IIS, or how's that experience?
It's not on IIS 7. On 6, it's a bear. I don't recommend 6 if you have any choice at all. Really, and the big difference there is just the URL rewriting. That's the big problem with IIS, and it's solved in 7 pretty much.
Would you recommend anyone use IIS if they could, or?
Yeah, if you have a choice, I would say go with Apache. If you don't have a choice, it will work on IIS. I think you're just going to have a couple of headaches that you wouldn't have necessarily on other systems.
And is that still a MySQL backend?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a couple of clients that run on IIS, and there's always something that's just not quite right. It's like 99% there, but then one plugin doesn't work.
Yeah, and WordPress is just kind of unhappy.
Yeah.
you just kind of feel it frowning. It's like,
yeah, or like a category won't be named correctly,
Yeah.
or just there'll be some tiny little oddity that if I had my choice, they'd be on a more like a LAMP configuration. We tend to, if we're recommending a hosting solution for our clients, we tend to go with Media Temple. And we would probably use like a dedicated virtual, and Ben's really the guy who does it, but he's back there chatting. But we would, if we know that the site's going to get a lot of traffic, sometimes we will split the database to a different server, so they won't be running on the same server, so we just get a little bit of speed that way. And we like Media Temple a lot because if there is an instance where a site is going to get hit a lot or going to have a heavy traffic day or something like that, we can on the fly add more RAM to it and more processing if we need to.
Randy, I want to make a confession. I'm not smart enough to be on the couch. So at any time you want to excuse me, IIS and rotary girders, I don't even know.
So you can do a chair.
I think it's ball bearings mainly. That's the new technology, don't you think? I just wanted to confess I'm not that smart.
Now I know with Media Temple's grid servers, there's a lot of issues with them and WordPress. I know the DFW WP Tech site was on the grid server site and it got hacked, which is kind of embarrassing when you're a WordPress group and your site gets hacked. So I moved it off of there. But if you had any trouble with the $50, the dedicated virtuals are higher than that, Media Temple?
I don't think we have. I know Ben does a lot of fine tuning to it. Am I right in saying it's a dedicated virtual?
We use DVs and more recently we use the VEs. The VEs are completely blank when you get them. So you get, install only that you need. I recommend the VEs, but that's just because I like to build things from the ground up.
Yeah, so their VE Linux service is a lot like Amazon EC2 or Rackspace Cloud Server. So you get a blank server and you install Apache and MySQL and PHP and all of that.
Yep.
Okay.
Randy, I'll join you in that confession. I had a site get hacked last week that was on shared hosting, and it wasn't WordPress. It was one of the other packages that was on with WordPress that I didn't know was there. It was one of those sites that I sort of inherited from someone else.
I gotcha.
Yeah,
I had
that
one
happens.
of my like a dev site get hacked one time that I'd forgotten I'd left it and it's still running. So I got an email from them that it had been hacked. So let's talk next about backing up your site or even source control. What are some of the things that you guys do to keep your code backed up, to deploy changes, move from one server to another? Let's start with you, Matt. I'm good to go around this way.
Yeah, I know we've recently been using some of the plugins that WordPress provides to do backing up of the database as well as some other things. And I saw recently, have they released a service? Has WordPress released a service for that?
Yeah.
What is it called?
VaultPress?
VaultPress, that's right.
Has anybody here used VaultPress yet?
I've looked at it, but I hadn't used it. But typically we once we set up the site, we don't really move around much. So we haven't done a lot of the conversion, from our site to somewhere else.
So you
but
build.
we use.
Do you build on your production boxes then?
No, we build on our local machines and then just upload the files and import the database. But we use some of the plugins. What's the plugin, Aaron, that we use? Okay.
WP backup,
yeah.
something like that.
It does a good job.
And then do you store the backups on the server itself, or do you have them sent off somewhere?
On the server, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Stephanie?
Oh, I use WP DB backup as well, and I download a copy of the database every time I make a major change. My development environment is kind of similar to yours. I just kind of develop my plugins and stuff on the desktop and then just install them up on the live machine. We actually do, though, have a backup of the whole server running as part of our virtual server management, and I don't have anything to do with that. It just happens. Thank goodness. One of the great things about being in a university, one of the few, sometimes that stuff is taken care of for you.
From our development standpoint, there's sometimes several developers working on a project at once, so we will have a local environment running where we're doing our own work, and then we will commit the file changes to a Subversion repository to keep everything versioned and hopefully merge changes together elegantly. And from there, there's a bit of magic in the form of a deploy script that pushes things up to the staging servers, and then from there, once it's all set and approved, then we would FTP or otherwise get the files to the production server. From a backup standpoint, we're not really using any plugins. We mostly have some scripts that are just copying all the files down regularly to a different server.
Do you guys have any trouble collaborating? I know one of the problems we have is if we're all working on our local machines, getting the changes in the database deployed to a central database. And we tried everyone connecting to this same central database, but then you'd run into issues if I connected that database and activated a plugin. The next time someone hit it, it would deactivate it because it couldn't find the files on their server. Then I'd hit it and I'd activate it again, and you'd have some kinds of problems like that. Do you guys have any tips or tricks for managing collaboration around that?
We haven't really run into many collaboration issues on a database side, and it might just be a little bit of our functions as developers are slightly different. I tend to do a lot more of like front-end styling type bits, and Ben will be fine-tuning it, and he'll be touching the files differently than I will, so there's not a lot of conflict.
Gotcha. Did you have something to add to that, Stephanie? Or do you collaborate with anyone, or is it just you?
No, we're such a small shop. It's just me handling the website, and then I have a sort of general IT networking support guy who manages the server.
Cory?
So about a year ago this month, we had a catastrophic crash on a dedicated box. We lost a hard drive and all that kind of stuff. And I'll admit, we didn't have any backups. And then we looked at WordPress, and there was DB, the database plugin or whatever, that is just basically database only. So we realized there was a need. We try to cater to web designers and developers. And so we feel like there's three parts to a backup strategy. There's backups, Then there's restores. So what happens if you have a backup, but how do you get it restored? And then the third is migrations for what you were saying, like Matt and his company, if they build on a sandbox domain or whatever, and transferring that over. So we built a product called Backup Buddy, and it does backups, restores, migrations, all of that. So that's our solution. We built it because we messed up. We had a catastrophic crash. There was a need in WordPress before VaultPress, and VaultPress does something different than Backup Buddy, and we have a chart for that and everything like that. But for developers, we were kidding with some people earlier that we wanted to call it Migration Buddy, because Backup Buddy will take a snapshot basically of your theme settings, your theme, your plugin, all that kind of permalinks, all that kind of stuff, to be able to migrate it. So it does Amazon S3, it'll back up to an Amazon S3 account, FTP, all that kind of stuff. And it'll do database only or full backup, so you can schedule weekly and monthly big backups and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I just played around with Backup Buddy this week in preparation of the panel, and it does work really well. So I used it to take a production site for a client that I'm going to be retheming a bit of the site, and took a full backup of the site and moved it over to a development environment in about 15 minutes. The biggest part was transferring the files down through FTP. It was really 5 minutes of setting it up and configuring it and getting it all to run.
And don't worry, I didn't code it, so
Okay.
it's finished.
Okay, that's good.
You guys were concerned, I know, with your IIS.
So talking about plugins, this is a good segue to the next question about, so code that you guys develop for clients or for your own sites, do you ever release those plugins? How much extra work is involved in making something ready to package versus ready for your individual clients? What are some tips and tricks and ideas around that? We'll start with you, Stephanie, and come this way.
I have done this a lot. I have over a dozen plugins on my site that I've released, and all of them came from either my day job work or a project that I was doing for a client that I just thought, hey, somebody else is going to need this at some point. The first time, it took me a long time to package it as a plugin because I'd never used Subversion. I had no idea what I was doing. Now it's probably maybe a couple of hours of extra work, and it's kind of tedious work too. And so I'll wait for a day when I'm feeling kind of brain dead and I'm just, not wanting to do a lot of like intense code work or writing or anything, and I'll just push out some plugins. Learning to use Subversion was probably the hardest part, and I'm on a Mac, so I hate using the command line if I can help it. The Mac clients are sort of lacking right now. There's one called Versions, which is very good for plugin work, but not so much for working with the WordPress core. It doesn't do patches, which is kind of important. So I have to use the command line for that kind of stuff. The biggest issue, though, is not so much packaging it up for release, it's supporting it afterwards. I get a lot of support requests, and especially while I was writing the book, I was on a deadline. I was like, guys, I'm just not going to be able to help you for the next 3 months. I'm sorry. There's only one of me, And so the support issue afterwards, it's a big consideration. I'm actually writing right now a plugin to migrate Gallery 2 installations into WordPress galleries, which again I needed for the day job.